In the late 1960s, growing opposition to U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War had produced massive demonstrations nationwide. The public opinions on the war were divided, and many Americans were becoming hostile toward the anti-war movement. April 30th, 1970, President Nixon publicly announced that American troops would soon be invading Cambodia, which was a neutral country to the west of Vietnam. Nixon thought that declaring a war in Cambodia would weaken North Vietnam's army to the point that the war would end. This escalation on the war effort forced immediate and intense reaction, especially on college campuses, because Nixon contradicted his previous plan to gradually reduce America's involvement in the war. Many government officials wanted Nixon to set an exact date for all American soldiers to leave Vietnam. However, he thought it was more important to stop the spread of communism and then quickly end the war. A prominent example portraying these hostile protests took place at Kent State University in Kent, Ohio. There was a series of events leading to the shootings as protesters clearly made a statement. Friday, May 1st was the first day of the protesting, where the peaceful demonstrations quickly turned to rioting and violence. The city mayor, Leroy Sachs, decided to declare the city in a state of emergency as the city suffered minor damage and after following all the protests. The next day, the mayor requested the presence of the National Guard in the city, but mainly on Kent State campus. Even with officers on campus, the students continued their anti-war protests, and the University Reserve Officer Training Corps, also known as the ROTC building, was burned down. It was a mystery as to who set the fire, as many held their own opinions. Initially, it was assumed that radical students set the fire, but others later argued that it was government agents who did it in order to provide a reason for their intervention. When firefighters arrived on campus, students tried to prevent them from putting out the fire, as they also broke windows and damaged other campus property. Governor James Rhodes appeared at the college and forbade any further demonstrations. However, the protesters did not listen. The next day at a news conference, Governor Rhodes called the protesters the worst type of people that we harbor in America, and we're going to eradicate the problem. We're not going to treat the symptoms. Sunday afternoon, protesters began a demonstration on campus while other sit-ins were taking place in the city. National Guard forced the protesters to disperse using tear gas, and troops also dismissed the sit-in on Main Street. The next day, Monday, May 4th, a rally was scheduled by the protesters, and National Guard was well aware of what they would be handling, but no one knew that day would later be remembered in American history. That Monday, there were around 2,000 students on campus, some protesters, other curious onlookers, and other harmless students going to or from their classes. National Guard began throwing tear gas canisters toward the crowd and ordered them to leave, but they did not listen. As the troops advanced upon the students, they moved over a hill, then down to the practice football field. After reaching a fence, some soldiers got down on one knee and aimed their weapons, leading the students to retreat to a nearby parking lot. Some students threw rocks and tear gas canisters at the guards until the troops finally went back up the hill. After reaching the top of the hill, one guard thought he heard a sniper fire, so he opened fire upon the crowd. Therefore, other guards joined in for a 13-second volley of gunfire. 4 people were killed and 9 were injured, while most of them were more than 100 yards away from the guards upon firing. Of those 13, only 2 were actively participating in the protest. One happened to be an ROTC student, and others were simply walking to or from their classes. Officials claim that the guards only fired in self-defense while being attacked by angry rioters. However, many photos, videos, recordings, and witnesses prove that the dead and wounded students were in no contact with the guards as they fired at random. After the shooting, no sniper fire was ever confirmed, creating even more controversy about the shootings being just or not. Witness Alan Canfora, who was shot in the right wrist, obtained a copy of the recording and claimed to faintly hear someone shout, "Point," followed by multiple voices yelling, "Right here, get set, point, fire," as you will hear about in the following interview.
Now with Alan Canfora with the May 4th Center in Kent, Ohio. Can you tell us about the announcement your group is about to make to the public?
Yes, on May 1st, 2007, the Kent May 4th Center and the students of the May 4th Task Force at Kent State University, we're going to be making an announcement proving that in 1970 the Ohio National Guard was ordered to fire. One of the commanding officers on the hilltop issued this verbal command. He shouted, "Right here, get set, point, fire." And then and the gunfire ensues for 13 seconds at Kent State.
It's an image etched in our minds, a reminder of how the Vietnam War came home via Ohio's Kent State University. It was a Kent State student who took this picture.
There isn't a day in my life that doesn't go by that I don't wake up or have some conscious thought of this. I was in Vietnam twice before. I didn't have the fear that I had on this campus. Helicopters swooping down, tear gas, bullets. You know, it was a scary thing. It's still, I get goosebumps even talking about it right to this moment.
Even this event did not lower the spirits in the anti-war movement, as demonstrations only grew larger and more frequent. Kent State, as well as nearly 500 other colleges, were closed or disrupted due to protests, and Nixon was forced to pay more attention to the movement. He appointed a committee to study what happened at Kent State, and it was known as the President's Commission on Campus Unrest. None of the guards were charged for killing the students, however many protesters were arrested for violently disagreeing with government. This Midwestern college was turned into the symbolic epicenter of student protests in the Vietnam era and stood for anti-war protests and government repression. The Kent State Massacre relates to the core themes of hope and despair and change and innovation. It relates to hope and despair because America's main goal at the time was to end the war in Vietnam, and were clearly voicing their opinions, but the war was continuing, and tragic events such as what happened at Kent State were still occurring. It relates to change and innovation because the nation drastically changed its ways of expressing their opinions as protests became more common and quickly turned to violence and chaos.